welcome to the third episode of Azimuth Podcast. I am your host, Kimberly.
And I'm Barrett. Today we're going to be diving deep into a hot-button issue that's kind of been in the news since the late 19th and early 20th centuries, making its way from the southern states all the way up north. Yep, Kimberly, we're talking about illegal immigration and the various arguments surrounding it.
But before we dive in, we want to clarify, we are focusing only on the illegal immigration that occurs, specifically those crossing the border illegally. We are not discussing people overstaying their visas, which is also another major issue.
Absolutely. The U.S. has been a nation built by legal immigrants, and there are many legal pathways to citizenship. But let's talk about the history of immigration laws in the United States. Early 20th century, the U.S. had relatively open borders with few restrictions on immigration until the late 19th and early 20th centuries. In 1920s through the 60s, the U.S. began imposing numerical quotas based on immigration from certain countries. In 1965, the Immigration and Nationality Act abolished the national origins quota system, prioritizing family reunification and skilled immigrants. In 1986, the Immigration Reform and Control Act, or the IRCA, granted amnesty to millions of unauthorized immigrants while attempting to strengthen border controls. In the 2000s, the debate intensified as attempts to reform immigration policy failed in Congress multiple times. This leads us into the 2020s and the surge of illegal immigration and the humanitarian crisis caused by not having a protected border.
Thank you for getting us up to speed. Now, Gallup, the news organization famous for its polls, conducted a polling event focused on legal and illegal immigration. In 2022, Gallup found that 60% of Americans are concerned about illegal immigration. But now, just 1 year later, the same question had over 70% answering that the border is at crisis levels.
And unsurprisingly, the 27% of those surveyed that said the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border was a minor problem or not a problem at all resided in the Midwest and Northeast.
That's right, Barrett. The topic has taken on new dimensions as Southern governors like Greg Abbott in Texas have started busing illegal immigrants to sanctuary cities in those areas, leading to concerns from the mayor of New York that they are overwhelmed, and even the governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, recently declared a state of emergency over skyrocketing migrants draining city and state resources.
Yes, according to New York City Mayor Eric Adams, the influx of migrants is projected to cost over $12 billion by 2025, reporting that nearly 100,000 asylum seekers have arrived in the city in the last year alone. New York City is past our breaking point, according to the mayor. Even Chuck Todd from NBC's Meet the Press said that Republican Governor Greg Abbott was right when he said busing the migrants to blue cities would turn the Democrat politicians against the Biden administration and pressure the White House to get control over the border. Today, we'll dissect the issues that are the areas of concern for the minority 27% of the population that thinks this is either a minor problem or not a problem at all. We've narrowed them down to 5 of their main arguments. 1, stopping illegal immigration is somehow racist. 2, it's unhuman to prevent people from seeking a better life. 3, environmental concerns such as border walls' effect on migratory animals. 4, a border wall will infringe on human rights. And 5, that lastly, halting illegal immigration could harm the economy. So let's start with the first argument. Is stopping illegal immigration racist?
Well, Barrett, some argue it is. But remember, illegal immigration is not exclusive to any one ethnicity. For example, voanews.com stated that 2% of illegal immigrants crossing the border in April of 2023 were actually from China. This paints a more complex picture than just Latin American immigrants. While the mainstream media focus on the Hispanic border crossers, it is important to note that Europeans, Africans, and Asians are all being detained at the southern border as well.
Exactly, Kimberly. And when somebody can afford a plane ticket to Central or South America but chooses to avoid U.S. customs, it raises eyebrows. It's like trying to enter a house through the back door without knocking. regardless of race, creed, color, or country of origin, that action seems suspicious. Well, I was in New York during the World Cup, and it was on in a bar, and I overheard two girls that were talking, and they were recent green card holders, and they were from Ireland. So they were Irish immigrants, and a gentleman that was behind me, I was watching the game, but a gentleman behind me asked if I was with those girls, and I said no. So he began to try and hit on the girls, and I couldn't help but their conversation kind of turned heated, and it was really interesting to hear what they decided to focus on, and it was immigration. And so she was, the girls were saying, look, this country was built on immigration. It was built on immigrants, and so I don't understand why you are anti-immigrant. That they were making this argument to the gentleman, and I couldn't help but step in. And I said, well, the problem is, you're absolutely right. The country was founded on immigrants and through immigration, but all of those people that came signed in. They took a ship. They went by the Statue of Liberty, give us your poor, you're tired, you're weak. And then they landed at Ellis Island, and then they signed in. And so I said that the issue is not whether or not immigration is good or bad. The issue is security. We want immigrants here. We just want to know who you are. And that made a lot of sense to them.
Well, good. Moving to the second argument, the notion that illegal immigrants are just seeking a better life. While it's undoubtedly true for many, U.S. Customs and Border Protection noted that 67% of those crossing are single adults. And in 2021, 70% of them were fighting-aged males.
And that is a concern. Just like I told the Irish immigrants, the issue revolves around security. We're catching those military-age males from countries that are hostile to the United States.
And the third argument, the environment, it's intriguing. While many argue against a border wall due to its effect on migratory animals, illegal border crossers have their environmental drawbacks as well. Refuge managers have reported tons of trash, abandoned vehicles, human waste, and the many wildfires started by illegal border crossers.
Number 4, human rights. Some see a border wall as an infringement on human rights. But what about the rights of Americans? The Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR, has reported numerous instances by violence by illegal immigrants. Among those instances of violence is the famous case of Kate Steinle, who was shot and killed on a busy San Francisco pier in broad daylight by an illegal immigrant who had been deported 5 times.
And lastly, the economic argument. While some believe that mass immigration can bolster Social Security with more workers, the strain on resources like affordable housing, schools, and more cannot be overlooked. And as FAIR points out, many households headed by non-citizens reported using welfare and other social services, further straining the system.
Yeah, on top of that, additionally, remittances sent back home by some of the fighting-age males, for instance, have the potential to hurt both the U.S. economy and the economies that they're sent to, given that inflation and disincentive for local employment they can cause.
And so, Barrett, legal pathways to citizenship do exist. While they may be challenging, they are there for a reason.
That's right. And look, from a doctrinal standpoint in military operations, a border wall is an obstacle. And in this instance, this particular obstacle is designed to turn people where the legal points of entry are into the United States so that they can have claims processed within the confines of the law. It's not necessarily to stop them from coming in. Again, it is to turn them so that they are forced to go into a legal point of entry. This is why it was so disheartening that a federal judge recently struck down a new asylum policy that President Biden's administration called crucial to curbing illegal border crossings along that southern border. Under the policy, most people were disqualified for applying for asylum if they had crossed into the United States without either securing an appointment at an official port of entry or proving that they sought legal protection in another country along the way, such as stopping in the U.S. consulate. I saw this process live in Sana'a, Yemen, in the consulate section of the U.S. Embassy, where Yemeni citizens had an appointment to apply for asylum and explain their situation to a State Department consular officer. It was routine and a thoughtful process.
And so they had to stay in their country of origin prior to being granted asylum, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Of course, why go through a boring court date if you don't have to?
So let's look at the numbers. With only a month and a half remaining in the 2023 fiscal year, Customs and Border Protection have almost had 2.5 million total enforcement actions with illegal immigrants. And those are just the people that were caught. So when I was in Korea, we had a brigade-on-brigade exercise. And so it was 3,500 American soldiers versus 3,500 American soldiers. And it was in the area called Twin Bridges. And we went back and forth playing offense, defense. And in one of my missions that I had, my platoon needed to move through enemy territory. Again, this is a training exercise, but move through enemy territory and occupy a spot in order to conduct an attack on a mechanized infantry company deep in the rear. And so oftentimes what would happen as a air assault rifle platoon leader walking, we would get launched about 12 hours in front of the mechanized forces. And so it would take us 12 hours and we'd walk 10 kilometers in mountainous terrain. And the Bradley infantry fighting vehicles would drive along the roads. And so we'd get there about the same time with us walking and leaving 12 hours. But I knew I wanted to make sure that my platoon was not attacked or interdicted while I was moving through enemy territory to get to the point where I was going to make my attack. So what I did is I split my I split the platoon into 4 squads, and I had them each conduct their own infiltration mission. And so we had a time and a place that we launched from, and a place to do a link up, and the squads had their own routes that they could choose. So later on, after the mission was an end of the mission, which is called an index, end of exercise, and a lesson learned from a infantry platoon that had spotted one of my squads, and they did not call in artillery on that squad because they didn't want to waste the opportunity. The one squad was not something that met their criteria to use artillery, because once the artillery is fired, our friendly Q-36 radars would be able to pick up those rounds, and then we'd be able to get the point of origin and do counter battery fire. And so seeing one squad did not meet the criteria to fire artillery. And so, but what he didn't realize is he saw one squad. What he didn't see were the other 3 squads. So you can only imagine that 2.5 million interactions, how many are not caught? I mean, there's probably 50 to 75% of the people that aren't caught coming through. So again, when you have a big surprising number like 2.5 million law enforcement actions by Customs and Border, you have to also think about what the phantom number actually is. So, it's just the tip of the iceberg, which is why that 27% of the U.S. needs to actually start caring about that southern border. So we've identified the problem, and in future episodes, we'll discuss solutions.
And that's a wrap for the first segment of Episode 3. Please stay tuned after these messages. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in. Welcome back to the second segment of our third episode. We're going to stay on the topic of illegal aliens, but shift to a different type.
All right, Kimberly. This is a special one, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We are diving into the cosmic waters of extraterrestrial life. A big thanks to our audience for suggesting this topic after reading about the congressional testimony from late July.
Absolutely. So let's start with the elephant in the room, Kimberly. Do you believe they exist?
Let's just say I do not want to believe that they exist. I mean, why travel all this way if they want something other than our resources?
That's true. I mean, if they've mastered interstellar travel, their planet could be out of resources. It's kind of like traveling cross country when your hometown grocery store runs out of milk.
That's a long trip just for milk. They must be really pissed after such a long space journey. Me, I'm just mad enough driving from Texas to Georgia for Christmas. They must be really grumpy.
And speaking of long journeys, I remember an interview with Harvard professor Ali Loeb on Fox News. He suggested that aliens might communicate with AI before humans, something about a likely kinship.
That's interesting. I mean, if they're advanced enough to reach us, they might relate more to AI. But then, what does that mean for us simple humans?
Good point. But here's a curveball. From a religious perspective, there are questions too, like do these beings have souls? And what does that mean for our understanding of divinity and life's purpose?
An age-old question. If they do have souls, maybe they're part of a grander divine plan. However, if they do not have souls,
they might have fewer qualms about annihilating us, which is a terrifying thought.
But Barrett, there's another angle. The whole government cover-up. I mean, there's been so much talk about the government hiding evidence. Is it to prevent panic or something else?
Well, there's that recent testimony that we alluded to earlier. David Grush testified in front of Congress, and it was essentially a testimony of a testimony without any concrete evidence.
Indeed. While it is compelling, we do need more than just stories. We need hard evidence.
But then again, some conspiracy theorists would argue that the lack of evidence is evidence. And they say if there aren't aliens, then there would be nothing for the government to cover up.
And speaking of theories and additional comments made by Harvard professor A.V. Loeb suggests that meeting an alien civilization could prompt humanity to unify.
Oh man, theories abound. But they do make you wonder what's really going on behind the scenes.
I heard this on another podcast that I follow. Aliens, they're smart enough to get here, but not smart enough to avoid crashing. Barrett, with all of your experience in the world, do you have any experience with aliens?
Well, not with aliens, but one time on a combat patrol in southeast Baghdad, I felt like I was transported to an alien planet, or at very least, an episode of The X-Files. We were on a combat patrol again in southern Baghdad, and we were looking for Uday and Kusei's house, and it was rumored to be in that area. However, we
and who is Uday and Kusei?
Excuse me. Yes, Saddam Hussein's children. They're his sons, and so we were looking for their compounds, and we came upon a compound, and we were doing what's called a cordon and search. So there was an outer perimeter that was established with combat units, and then and we were able to go into the center of the cordon, and the cordon is designed to make sure that nobody comes out of the compound that you're searching, but also so that enemy forces cannot go in. So not only protecting you, and they're also stopping people from leaving. And so we went into this compound, and it was straight out of Pee Wee Herman's Playhouse. The center of this large multi-acred piece of property had a white castle that really looked like the White Castle logo. I mean, it was just a fantastical Lego-style White Castle with gray mortar and a big giant red door. It was, again, something out of what you'd see as a cartoon. And there were all of these weird statues that were everywhere. It was just absolutely just surreal. And he had a herd of little pygmy antelope. And, I mean, these things, I mean, they're the size of a small dog, but they have antlers.
I thought that was something from a commercial.
Yeah, no, it was real. And anyway, I guess there was like and some type of alpha male or herd male, and he kept ramming my shin with his antlers, and I was like, I cannot make this up. I mean, this is absolutely crazy. I'm being attacked by this little pygmy antelope, and he had different animals that were caged up. It was very sad. In one of the cages, he had a golden eagle, and the thing had a 5-6 foot wingspan, and it was all hunched over. And I tried to open the cage and get the eagle to fly away, and it was, I guess, kind of had Stockholm syndrome, so it didn't want to leave. But it was just so surreal walking around that literally it felt like I was on some kind of alien mothership's museum or zoo, because of all the weird animals and the different specimens that were locked up in cages, and just this imposing white fantasy castle as the main dwelling. But the story gets weirder. So,
weirder.
Yes, it does. So we did find Uday's house and his compound. It was right on the river, and it was, I believe, it was the Tigris River, and it he had a bunch of exotic vehicles, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Bentleys, except they were all painted like weird colors at the time. Now you see a little bit more of this now, but in the 2003, not a lot of lime green Lamborghinis, not a lot of purple Ferraris running around. Anyway, there's just this amazing collection, 7 or 8 exotic vehicles, Mercedes, Jaguar, things like that. And so the butler, or the groundskeeper, didn't know where Uday was. He hadn't been captured by that time. And so anyway, he had a couple of yachts that were on the river as well. And so we called it in and said, look, we've got the house, we've secured these vehicles, and we moved on. We left a squad there to kind of guard everything, and we moved on to additional houses. And later on, about an hour later, we came back, and all of the cars were gone. And it turns out that a Special Forces, Army Green Berets, Special Forces A-team was monitoring our brigade frequency. And they heard that these exotic cars were here. And they loaded up one of their Humvees, and we were calling a wrecker. They decided to go ahead and just drive the cars off the compound and onto their compound at the Baghdad International Airport, or BIAP. And so the squad that was there said, look, they said that they were going to take care of it, and they laughed as they drove off. And so we heard that for many a week that there were drag races that were occurring on the runways of Baghdad International Airport for the Special Forces A team. Great story. I would have liked to have had one of those cars, but again, it's one of those combat stories that was just such a surreal experience that you can't make it up. But anyway, that wraps our second segment of our podcast, and please continue after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.
Welcome back to the third segment of Azimuth Podcast. I'm Barrett.
And I'm Kimberly. In this segment, we will continue to profile presidential candidates to help you make informed decisions.
Today, we're diving into the political journey of Asa Hutchinson, from his early days in the Arkansas to his current run to the 2024 presidential nomination. Kimberly, this is going to be a very interesting one.
Absolutely, Barrett. Hutchinson's trajectory reflects a lot about American politics, especially in states like Arkansas, which have seen significant ideological shifts.
So let's start at the beginning. Asa Hutchinson was a name that once resonated in the blue corridors of Arkansas. Kimberly, can you walk us through some of his early days?
Certainly. When Hutchinson was coming up, Arkansas was solid blue. But this started to change around the Reagan era. Hutchinson himself was the county chairman in Bentonville, Arkansas, when Reagan was elected, and like many, Reagan converted him.
Ah, the Reagan effect. And Bentonville. That's Walmart territory, right?
Exactly. We don't have any explicit info on Hutchinson's ties to Walmart, if any, but given its significance in Bentonville, one can't ignore its possible influence.
Well, moving on to his interactions with another big name, Bill Clinton. Hutchinson was the state party chairman when Clinton was governor.
Yes, and to add to another layer, he was a House manager during Bill Clinton's impeachment proceeding. Imagine the dynamics there.
Right. And speaking of dynamics, let's touch on Hutchinson's recent stances, particularly on transgender issues.
Well, this is an interesting one. He signed a ban on trans individuals in sports. However, he vetoed a bill banning trans surgeries for minors, citing that it infringed on parental rights.
A nuanced approach and controversial for some.
Very controversial for some, but it is the same nuanced approach that saw him address the aftermath of the George Floyd riots. He not only quelled unrest, but involved BLM community leaders in reforms.
That's leadership. Speaking of Kimberly, Hutchinson's economic achievements as governor are also noteworthy.
Absolutely. A $2 billion surplus and the creation of 100,000 jobs while he was governor. It showcases his economic management skills.
But let's address the elephant in the room, Hutchinson's position on Trump.
His refusal to sign a pledge supporting Trump, if convicted, did alienate some, but it is a testament to his independent thinking.
And speaking of his positions, his foreign policy, especially regarding Ukraine, speaks volumes about his stance on the global platform.
Definitely. And his proposals on domestic energy, domestic supply chains, and reversing Biden's orders align him with a nationalistic, pro-growth stance.
So, Kimberly, let's watch Governor Hutchinson's campaign video from his website, asa2024.com.
Hi, I'm Asa Hutchinson, and I'm running for President of the United States of America. I find that people are always curious as to why I'm running for president. The answer is that I care deeply about this country, and it is on the wrong track under President Biden. I'm prepared to meet the greatest challenges we face as a nation. My experience is unmatched. I served as head of the DEA, and I'm prepared to provide real solutions for the fentanyl crisis our communities face. When it comes to securing our border, I had that responsibility under President Bush, and I know what needs to be done. As governor of Arkansas for 8 years, I not only balanced the budget, but created record surpluses. I'm deeply concerned about our nation's $32 trillion debt, and I know we have to stop living off of borrowed money. As president, I will have a pro-growth energy policy. In other words, let's unleash our energy producers so we can grow our economy and be energy independent. My experience as a federal prosecutor is important for our nation as we meet the challenge of violence in our cities. And yes, I believe in an America that leads. We will compete with China and continue our support of Ukraine. I'm excited about the opportunity this campaign brings to shape the future and to set an example in the White House of leadership based upon our national character and individual freedom. That is why I'm running for president. Please join the team by visiting asa2024.com.
Okay. That was pretty good. I mean, it's short and sweet. Not a lot of music or no music whatsoever, not a lot of imagery. It was just him laying out the facts as he saw them. So, yeah. So, Kimberly, what strengths have you identified for Governor Hutchinson?
So, strengths. One, he has broad experience. Hutchinson has held positions at various levels of government from local to federal. His roles range from U.S. attorney to governor, giving him a comprehensive understanding of the system. 2, his economic management. His tenure as governor of Arkansas saw a $2 billion surplus and the creation of 100,000 jobs, thus showcasing his ability to oversee economic growth and stability. 3, balanced approach to crisis. Hutchinson's response to the George Floyd riots, particularly involving community leaders for reforms, shows a propensity for balanced governance and crisis management. 4. Foreign policy stance. His pro-Ukraine stance indicates a clear understanding of international geopolitics and the importance of a robust NATO to deter potential aggressions from countries like Russia. 5. Commitment to core conservative values. From his history of tax cuts to the initiative to increase computer science education, Hutchinson has shown a dedication to certain core conservative principles. And Barrett, do you see any potential weaknesses?
Yeah, I do. I see a few. So his nuanced stances might alienate some core voters. Decisions like vetoing the bill banning trans surgeries for minors while banning trans athletes from sports might alienate staunch conservative voters who prefer more definitive stances. His relationship with Trump, he refused to pledge support for Trump if convicted, may turn away a significant faction of the Republican base, particularly the more loyal Trump supporters. His involvement with the Clinton impeachment, and as he served as the House manager during Bill Clinton's impeachment trial, he may not resonate well with certain centrist or left-leaning voters, making it difficult for Hutchinson to gather broad bipartisan support. And also a potential lack of charismatic appeal. Compared to some more media-savvy politicians, Hutchinson might lack the charismatic appeal to energize a national electorate, especially younger voters. And then finally, the potential corporate ties. Given Bentonville's significance with Walmart, any uncovered ties or dealings with the corporation might be viewed critically in an area where corporate-minded political relations are under the microscope.
He's certainly a complex figure, Barrett. Someone who's navigated the intricacies of local and national politics with a distinct touch.
Well said. And that's it for today's episode, folks. We encourage our listeners to engage with us on social media. Let us know what questions you have for these candidates and what issues matter to you. We're here to help make sense of the race, but we're also here to give you, our listeners, a voice.
Thank you for tuning in as we aim to release new full episodes on Tuesdays and the individual segments throughout the week. Thanks and goodbye. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.